Look, there's more confirmation today that the government's renewable energy transition is failing the nation. We all know that the government's climate and energy policies have failed on price. This graph shows what's been happening to our electricity prices, despite Labor's promise to cut them by $275 a year. They keep going up to record levels. The only dip down was just there at the end of the graph. You see they dropped down for a while when the government spent taxpayers' money to subsidise power bills in the lead up to an election. So power prices are certainly a disaster, but supplies are being jeopardised too. And we've seen this with warnings about electricity use in the past and governments having to shell out taxpayers' money to try and keep coal-fired power generators going. The same ones they want to shut down, they're paying them to keep going. And today there's news that in the leading renewable energy state of South Australia, the government is having to extend the life of a major gas generator. The Australian Financial Review reports the South Australian government has asked energy retailer AGL to extend the life of its ageing Torrens Island gas generator by 2 years, amid warnings by the energy market operator that its scheduled closure would pose energy risks for the state. Yeah, they need to keep the gas going until a new interconnector with New South Wales is built, even though it already relies, South Australia that is, already relies heavily on an interconnector with Victoria, which brings in coal-fired power when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. Still, when they eventually shut all the coal-fired power stations in the east, all the interconnectors in the world are not going to supply power to the national grid in the quantities we need, because we need generation. Let me bring in Zoe Hilton. She's the Senior Energy Policy Analyst at the Centre for Independent Studies. Thanks for joining us, Zoe. We heard a bit from you last night because you were in that alternative economic roundtable that was held publicly. Just how big of a miss is it for the real economic roundtable to ignore the issue of energy supplies?
The fact that the government seems to have no interest in looking at what is actually driving prices up in the electricity space is deeply concerning. I think the only real policy solution they seem to have put forth from this so-called economic roundtable is to encourage superannuation funds to invest more in clean energy by relaxing their performance benchmark targets, which is very concerning for anyone who is relying on their super fund to provide their retirement savings. Because really the options are either these projects, which are generally speaking not very economic projects, are going to deliver poor returns, or in the case of projects that have capacity investment scheme taxpayer underwriting, we are literally going to be funding people's retirements through taxpayer funding, which was the whole point of getting super in the first place, to avoid paying people the pension. So really we're just going to be paying people the pension, but through a much more complicated process that is going to drive up our electricity bills at the same time.